everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Unlock New Library Distribution Opportunities with the Palace Project. Thank you for joining us today as we will introduce the Palace Project's mission and its growing network of libraries. Today, you'll hear from the Palace team as well as directly from Vancouver Public Library about their experience with Palace, and you'll learn how to opt into new distribution opportunities that can help your titles reach more readers. And now we'll be starting with Cav from the Palace team.
Hi, thank you, Paula. My name is Cav Kavanaugh, and I am the Senior Sales Manager here at the Palace Project. I am the individual that works directly with libraries when they are looking to source e-content from the Palace Marketplace, as well as libraries that are interested in adopting the Palace Project hosted software and service. So first, I want to talk about the project vision. This is to say that we are at the heart of Palace. Our belief is that the public library is a digital center of knowledge and creativity for their communities. We build a digital future for and with libraries. By creating a seamless and easy to use system, including a library staff-facing platform, an e-content mobile app, the Palace Project lets libraries engage directly with patrons to improve, enhance, and expand the resources available to both the library and the patrons in which they serve in their communities. We are aligned with libraries, and we like to focus on protection of patron privacy and information, and most importantly, advocating for fair and more favorable licensing models across the board. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background about Palace. In spring of 2019, Lyrasis, DPLA, and New York Public Library collaborated to build what we all know as Simplified or Simply E. And moving forward in January, Lyrasis and DPLA received a sizable grant by the Knight Foundation. In March of 2021, the Palace Project was officially born. In June 2021, we signed an agreement with Amazon Publishing, and in October 2021, Palace became live in the app for both Android and iOS devices. In June of 2022, we then signed on with the Audible content, and now both Amazon and Audible content were made available and are still made available to libraries that are utilizing the Palace Project. In December 2022, the first academic library went live, though many know Palace to be a public library-facing app, but of course our academic library partners wanted in, and they became live in 2022. But we continue to grow from there. In 2023 and 2024, we started including additional integrations, such as Blackstone Unlimited, who has made their content exclusively available to libraries within the Palace app outside of their own proprietary app. And we have partnerships with BookBridge, Unlimited Audio, and a discovery layer, which many of you all know, Aspen Discovery. In spring of 2025, we hit a huge milestone where we have upwards of 700 plus libraries that are live and in the Palace Project app. And lastly, in July of 2025, the Palace Project transitioned fully to Lyrasis as the home of the Palace Project. And with that background, I'd like to pass over the Zoom baton, if you would, to Micah May.
Thank you, Cav. I'm Micah May. I'm Director of Business Development in the eBooks and Community Engagement Division at Lyrasis, where the Palace Project is housed. I just joined Lyrasis in July. I was previously at DPLA, where I led DPLA's work on Palace, now all consolidated at Lyrasis. So I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of the Palace Project from a technical and business perspective, starting with just the basic components of the system. Palace is a little different than other ebook distributors in that we have tried to disaggregate some of these technical components and use sort of interoperable microsystems, which we believe is the best practice from a technology perspective and also gives libraries a lot more flexibility in how they serve digital content to their patrons. So the most visible part of the Palace Project are the apps. We have a really strong native apps in iOS and Android. You can go get those apps at any time, and there are two different collections that you can access without a library card. There's a collection called the Palace Bookshelf, which has over 20,000 free, openly licensed, so Creative Commons licensed or public domain ebooks that we've cleaned up and made available there, which is a great way to test out the app, open to anyone with no authentication. There's also a special collection that we support that Lyrasis pays for, we buy the books for, called the Banned Book Club, which has over 1,000 titles that have been removed from schools and libraries. We wanted to make sure that access continued, so we make those available for free in the app. You can also get access to that collection. You'll just need to go through a few steps in the app to get a virtual library card, which is a technology that many of our libraries also take advantage of in order to issue digital library cards to patrons within their geographic area. So both of those collections allow you to try out the app, and you'll also see that library patrons can select their library from a dropdown and then see the collections available within their library. Behind the apps is something we call the Collection Manager, or the Palace Manager. It's a administrative portal and a piece of middleware that allows libraries to take books from lots of different locations where they've bought the books and merge them into one collection. It also gives them lots of tools to sort of curate and present that collection as they see fit. So we'll talk more about that, but this is a really important piece. Libraries have sometimes been a little bit disintermediated from their patrons by digital services and really not able to curate their own digital shelves. And so the Palace Collection Manager puts that power back in the hands of librarians to bring all the books they purchased together in one place and really control how those books are discovered by patrons. The third item is the Palace Marketplace, which is very important to you as publishers. It is the only nonprofit-driven distributor of ebooks and audiobooks in the country for libraries. So we'll be talking a lot about that. That is a full-fledged marketplace with well over 1 million titles, all of the big five, Amazon and Audible, where we make licenses and ownership of ebooks available to libraries. And we try to work closely with publishers and libraries to find models that are a win-win for both, that publishers and authors and other rights holders get paid a fair amount, but the libraries also can afford to serve these books to patrons without breaking their budgets. The last couple on here are two other attendant parts of the Palace project. We have the Palace Bookshelf, which I mentioned, this large curated collection of free content, and then this virtual library card, which is a service that many of our libraries take advantage of, so they can offer digital library cards in-app. So just in terms of some of the main highlights of the Palace project, really important, it allows libraries to bring collections from multiple sources together in one really easy to use app. That's probably the single most important differentiator. Otherwise, using other proprietary distribution systems, libraries are kind of stuck with these silos where they buy a book from distributor A, they have to serve the book in that distributor's app. If they buy books from more than one place, then suddenly their digital experience becomes fragmented and users have to go to lots of different apps or web experiences to get access. Palace solves that by merging them all into one place. There's quite a bit of unique content available in Palace in terms of, licensing models and publishers that are not choosing to distribute through other channels, as well as opportunities for libraries to integrate locally published content, free open content without paying for it, etc. So a lot of unique both models and content that is a real differentiator for libraries. Palace is really designed to maximize discovery, and that means not just finding books, and we'll also talk more about this, but finding available books, finding the books libraries would have patrons choosing. And so we've done a lot of things to change the algorithms that drive the discovery environment to really optimize how patrons find their way to books and to maximize sort of librarian recommendations instead of having patrons stuck seeing only the most popular books, which may already have holds queues. And finally, we always have a really top focus on ease of use and accessibility. So, we may not always have the fanciest, most complicated features, but we always make sure that the apps are really simple and easy to use. And we always have a very strong eye to making sure that the technology works well for people that need extra help, whether that's a vision impairment or dyslexia or something else. So a very high degree of accessibility in the apps.
Hi, Micah. We have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
So from James Lorimer, In other words, all Overdrive titles can be made available through Palace?
Yes, exactly. And that's actually a great segue to these next two slides, which some of my colleagues think I overuse. They're a little, it could be a little technical, a little nerdy, but I think it helps to see this as a picture. So yes, James, we divide this architecture into three broad components, sort of back-end content providers. So that's the Palace Marketplace, but also Overdrive, Baker and Taylor's cloud library products, et cetera, other providers of digital content, and then that unique piece of middleware, the Palace Content Manager. And yes, that allows books from Overdrive to be accessed by the library through Overdrive's API, merged with content from other sources, and all be available to readers in the front end. So here's sort of the tech diagram of how that works. So Overdrive would be one of those other sources. So that is not every single distributor on the market. Those distributors have to agree to play ball, which usually comes when libraries pressure them. But we have many integrations, including, yes, with Overdrive and a number of the other market leaders in terms of library ebooks. And then that content can be merged and managed in the Palace Manager and served in the Palace app, regardless of where the backend is. We think about this, kind of like physical books. No library would ever say, oh, here's the building for the books we bought from Baker and Taylor, and over here is another building for books you bought from Ingram. That would be crazy, right? So the patron shouldn't have to know where the book is coming from. And so it's visible in the bibliographic record, but patrons now can find books from any source that they were purchased from, regardless of where it was purchased through this architecture. So again, the Palace project, the whole experience is really designed to maximize discovery, and there are some very important features that are a little different than other apps that help to do that. And the first is that the algorithm that drives what is in the swim lanes by default, what's in those sort of, digital shelves, horizontal rows of jacket covers typically are it's based on what content is available now. So that means that if a title already has a long holds queue, you won't find it in those lanes by default unless you're in like a bestsellers lane. Now, library patrons that know what they want will still search for that book and get in queue. But what we found is that 2 out of every 3 library digital borrowers never hit the search box during their entire session. They never search. So they're just browsing for what the library puts in front of them. So if by elevating titles that are actually available, we can get a much broader use of the library's collections, driving attention and use to, backlist or older titles or titles that are less known. And that allows us to, really maximize libraries' values around discovery and make books that are currently available available to patrons to read, as opposed to having them directed at books that already have long holds queues where they're just waiting in line. So James, I'm going to just take a second and answer your question. To support libraries' desire to promote discovery and access to Canadian authors and books, does Palace use Canadian author tag available in Onyx metadata we supply? That is a good question. I am not aware of us doing that right now. We would be open to, but I can dig into that more and figure out what that would look like. We do have other tools in the manager that Canadian libraries are using, and Zoe will be able to talk to this a little more when she speaks to how Vancouver Public Library is deploying Palace. So they can, for example, curate swim lanes with Canadian authors and titles, and many are doing that. I'm not aware right now of us using that Onyx tag in an automated way, but that's something I'd certainly be happy to look into more. So another aspect of discovery in terms of design for discovery is that we make sure that participating in our preferred models, which we'll talk more about in depth, really ensures that titles are maximally discovered in special lanes that we create and selections as well, and that we bubble those titles up. So that's another way we try to optimize discovery. Finally, Palace automatically suggests other titles by the same author or series so that it's easy for patrons to find their way to more similar books they might also enjoy reading. So again, in terms of how you as a publisher interact with the Palace Marketplace and can maximize discovery there. Um, we do offer these preferred models, which I can talk more about. They are our ownership model, which allows libraries to own that one digital copy. They're still limited to one user at a time, but they have some really important sort of preservation rights to be able to transfer the book to another safe host, potentially reformat it down the line if the format became obsolete. And that is a really important model for libraries because they want to have these collections for the long term. Our other preferred models are a bundle of 40 lens, up to 10 of which can be used simultaneously. That's been really well received by libraries and I think publishers as well. It kind of strikes a balance. So after 40 lens, the library has to repurchase the title, but they're able to take some advantage of the digital format by lending it to 10 people at once. We also encourage publishers to opt into a small bundle of 5 simultaneous uses and a larger bundle of 100 simultaneous uses. Those are sort of priced accordingly. The bundle of 5 is more on a per loan basis, but it gives libraries an easy way to kind of try out books that they don't know exactly how popular they'll be. And the bundle of 100 has been really well received, especially by large libraries that want to burn down holds queues on very popular items. Those also can be priced at a higher, price per loan than something like the bundle of 40. Those are our sort of top preferred or recommended models, but I want to be very clear that the marketplace can support a huge variety of models. We can support bundles of any number of lens. We can support 1 or 2 year licenses. We can support simultaneous use collections. So there's a large range of models that are available to publishers. And if there's something else you'd like to try and offer, we would encourage you to do so, and we can work with you to set that up. What we've heard from libraries is they want some options. They're not happy with having just one way they can acquire a book. And in general, the option that libraries like least are the time bound, the 1 or 2 year licenses. And that's because of a couple things. First, they're not sure if they'll get the value out of it. If the book doesn't circulate much, then it may have only been lent, a small number of times and it will still expire, which doesn't seem very fair. And it also just creates a lot of work for libraries in terms of the workflows. So licenses that are expiring have to be repurchased. If they're not being repurchased, those catalog records have to be removed from the catalog. If they are repurchased, but there's a delay, sometimes they're removed and re-added. So from a workflow perspective, the time-bound models seem to be the worst for libraries. So we really encourage publishers to participate in some perpetual model, either the ownership or the traditional perpetual model, and then mostly work with bundles of loans, whether that's the 40 by 10 or some other variant. That seems to be what libraries are most excited about, and yet it still puts some fair constraints on what libraries acquire so that they need to repurchase if the book is popular and loaned quite a bit. So when publishers participate in those preferred models, which eBOUND is supporting and you're all encouraged to opt into, then we have a highlighted tab that you see on the right of this screenshot at the top that just lists all the publishers participating in those models, and we direct libraries to. We also have this wonderful group of librarians we call our curation core. It's about a dozen librarians that most of them have other library jobs, a few are retired, and they do curatorial work for Palace Project, including creating selections. Those are thematic. There's back to school selections right now. There'll be Halloween selections soon. There are selections by license model. And we always preference publishers that are offering library-friendly models, including our preferred models. A lot of our libraries are using those selections as the basis for their acquisitions. That curation core also does custom collection development for libraries. So libraries can meet with the curation core or fill out a form, tell us about their collection development priorities, and we will build custom carts that meet those priorities. And we are always, having an eye to bubbling up and preferencing publishers that are offering models that work well for libraries, including those preferred models. And that's, I guess, the last point here is just that if you offer those preferred models, that kind of sends a signal to publishers that you're library friendly and willing to put forward acquisition options that work for them. So just to kind of recap in terms of what makes Palace special, in terms of the business terms, Palace only takes 30%, which I think is at the low end of what other distributors take. The other 70 would be available for the distribution partners like eBOUND and the publisher itself. Palace aggregates content from multiple vendors into one convenient app. The only service in the world that does this, where you can, to James's question earlier, buy a book in Overdrive, buy a book from Baker and Taylor, buy a book from the Palace Marketplace, make them all available in the Palace app, so the patron doesn't have to know where they came from, doesn't have to go to multiple places. The Palace app prioritizes and elevates available content as opposed to the most popular content. So the result is the patrons generally are not hitting holds queues near as often. They're finding things they can borrow right now. We surface metadata in the marketplace and in the app for end users, including about accessibility, which has been very important to make sure that patrons know if they need accessibility features, they know how well this will work. We go to great lengths to protect privacy and don't sell any patron data, which is, much better aligned with library values than some of our commercial competitors. This is largely because Palace is entirely driven by nonprofits. It's based at Lyrasis, which is the oldest library serving nonprofit in the US. And we provide an infrastructure that allows for further innovation. So we're talking right now with a number of other partners that you'll see rolling out over the coming year that will allow libraries to kind of mix and match this technology with other discovery environments, alternative front-end apps. They can pull in collections that don't come from us, but that they have through other sources. So the goal is really to provide a flexible piece of infrastructure that libraries can configure as they see best to serve their patrons. So now I'd like to pass it to our friend Zoe. She's been one of the leads on deploying Palace at the Vancouver Public Library. And so Zoe, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Zoe. I am the manager of digital services at Vancouver Public Library. My team manages the ebook vendors and ebook platforms that the library works with. Because of where we are today, I want to add that before I became a librarian, I also worked in independent publishing for years. I was a managing partner at New Society Publishers way, way back in the day when they were primarily a US publisher. And in addition to working in publishing and being a librarian, I am also an author, most recently with Doubleday here in Canada and with Scribner in the US. So I'm coming today with my feet in all three of these worlds. I'm not sure how I got 3 feet, but my feet are in all three of these worlds, and I care really deeply about all of these groups. So about a year ago, July of last year, Vancouver Public Library and Edmonton Public Library launched the first Canadian instances of the Palace project. And our thinking in doing that is that we are big libraries with a fair amount of resources, and we could work out some of the growing pains and kinks with bringing a product that had primarily been in the US into Canada. And that once we had done that, it would sort of smooth the path for other library systems, smaller library systems to come on board. And I think that's what we're starting to see happen across Canada. I think what I'm supposed to do today is give you a little case study of how we've implemented the Palace project at VPL and how we've rolled it out. But as I was thinking about it this morning, I realized it's not really the most relevant thing for me to tell a group of publishers. I'm not sure that it's going to be interesting or relevant to you. And I think what I would rather do is back up a little bit and talk about the context that libraries are facing right now with ebooks and why we're so excited about the Palace project. And in particular, why these preferred licensing models that Micah has been talking about are so critical at this juncture. So you've probably heard that libraries are facing a lot of challenges with ebooks right now. There's been a lot of articles in the press. They usually get sort of distilled down into the prices are too high. The ebooks that the library buys are often 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times higher than the ebooks that an individual would buy in the Kobo store or wherever they buy their ebooks. But that's actually, I don't think prices are the biggest challenge that we're facing. I think the biggest challenge is the licensing models themselves. Hold on, I'm going to close chat because otherwise I'm going to be tempted to read comments as they come in, and that's not going to work for me. The biggest challenge is the licenses themselves, because when the library pays for an ebook, we're not buying the ebook. Mostly, in most instances, we are buying a license to use that ebook and lend it out to patrons. And many of those licenses come with a 2-year limit, as Micah was mentioning. And after 2 years, the book just evaporates from our collection. So this is presenting a real challenge for you. And I'll give you an example of how this plays out. Every year, Vancouver Public Library has about $5 million to spend on books and publications. And I'm just going to say, let's say that $1 million of that is for ebooks and downloadable audiobooks. Please don't quote me on the actual number because I'm doing some aggressive rounding, but let's say we have $1 million a year for ebooks. The year comes around, we have $1 million, we go out and we see all the shiny new books that you lovely folks have published, and we purchase $1 million worth of those books. Next year comes along, we get another $1 million, we purchase another $1 million worth of new books. Next year, same thing, but that year we have to make a choice because we want to buy all the new books, but we also have to repurchase all the books that came out 2 years ago and all the books that came out 4 years ago and 6 years ago, because all of those books are spontaneously evaporating from our collection. And we know that there's a lot of patrons who still want to read those books, not in large numbers, but a steady trickle. Maybe people have recently discovered an author and they want to go back and read all their previous works. If they're older than 2 years, the only way we have that book is if we purchase it again. So every year we get $1 million to spend, but we also have $1 million worth of books disappear from our collection. And this makes it impossible for the library to build a deep and growing collection, which is how we've always operated. So this is really a challenge for libraries. The other thing I want to say about this is related to mid-list and backlist books and authors. I myself am a mid-list author. My book was not a bestseller. I will never write a bestseller. Many of my favorite books are mid-list books. The problem that these short-term licenses create for libraries is that a mid-list book will often circulate 4 or 5 times a year. And that is great for the author who's trying to build an audience, is great for our patrons. And it's enough to justify keeping that book on a shelf, or it's enough to justify keeping it in our digital collection. But 4 or 5 circulations a year financially is not good enough to justify repurchasing that book every 2 years for the rest of time. So at some point, we have to just let that book go. And as an author myself, I know that someday my book is going to go out of print. And I really hope that when people say to me, "Oh, I didn't know you wrote a book, where can I read it?" that I can point them to a library and say, it's not for sale anymore, but you can go to the library and read it. We as libraries want to give your books a long life where audiences can continue to find them for years and years to come. And these 2-year licenses are really making that difficult. I think the last thing I want to say about this, actually, I'm just scrolling through my notes to see. I do want to say one more thing about the ownership license that Micah mentioned before, and I think is going to talk a little bit more. We recently had experience at Vancouver Public Library. I won't name the publisher and I won't name the vendor, but I will say they're not here today. Where we had purchased a bunch of ebooks with a perpetual license. So not an ownership model, not a time limited model, but we were purchasing these and we were supposed to have access to them perpetually. We had them for years. They had a steady trickle of usage. They were well-liked resources. And then one day we got a call from a patron who said that all of the images in their book, and these were travel books, so they were very image heavy, all of the images in their book had been replaced with that sort of broken JPEG icon that indicates that a electronic photo is no longer available. And we looked, and not only was it that book, but it was every book in this collection that we had purchased. All the images were gone. We contacted the platform. We said, there seems to be some problem. All the images have disappeared from this collection. And they said, yeah, there's nothing we can do about that. We lost the rights to those, and we had to remove them. Now, again, the library had purchased these with the understanding that we had perpetual access. And the vendor said, well, you do have perpetual access, you still have the books, but we no longer have this integral content to the books. And this is a recent example of why library C ownership is so important, is that we see ourselves as custodians of these books. And when we purchase one, we want to take care of it. We want to back it up. We want to be able to make sure that the format is still compatible. This might not be appropriate for every book under the sun, but there are many books where the library wants to know that we're going to be able to continue to offer this book perpetually with all of its features intact, and nobody can come along and remove sections from that book. There's other examples, but that's the most recent one that's on my mind. So perpetual models, ownership models, these are so crucial to libraries right now because they are facing this real critical juncture where it's no longer sustainable to keep buying the same number of new books this year when so many millions of dollars of books are disappearing from our catalog. And libraries are having to make hard choices about which do we go up? Do we stop carrying backlist or do we stop buying new books? Obviously, we want neither of that. We want to keep giving publishers money because we want publishers to keep publishing. Same with authors. We want to give them money so they keep writing. But we're really in a bind where it's becoming impossible to do that. So I'll throw it back to you. I'll probably have more to say in the Q&A if people have questions.
Thank you, Zoe. And I apologize. I think I probably should have put this slide before Zoe, but I'll just real quick give this more in-depth rundown, which I did verbally, of our preferred models, and happy to talk more about this individually with anyone who is trying to sort these out and decide what to offer. So again, this newest model allows libraries to own the digital copy of the book. They still have to keep it on a very secure DRM protected platform, serve it with DRM to one user at a time. But they have certain rights, like to transfer it to another host if they decide to move their collection. It has to be a host that has robust security environment and DRM. They could theoretically update the format in the future if the format became obsolete and the publisher's not issuing a new version, that kind of thing. So that's an exciting new model. We also are happy to support the kind of more traditional perpetual one at a time model, which allows libraries to lend the book to one user at a time indefinitely. I mentioned the bundle of 40 with 10 lends available at one time. This kind of balances publishers and rights holders' need for the book to eventually expire. So it does after about 40 lends, which based on our research is kind of at the low end of when physical books might be worn out. Usually that's like 50-ish lends. So this kind of rounds a little bit down from that, but gives libraries this boon of being able to lend it to 10 patrons at once. So it helps them make the books more available and potentially have to repurchase sooner. And then the bundles of 5, I also mentioned that, we're increasingly encouraging publishers to also offer the bundles of 100. Just one sort of technical point to be clear about, you don't have to set prices in the Onyx for these. What we would do is in our agreement, there's a multiplier. So you'd set one library list price. You'd say, okay, the ownership model is library list price, and then the others are all a derivative of that. So they can be at the same price. You can say 40 by 10 is at 0.8 or 1.2. So you just tell us that in the contract. You can change that at any time. And then we will generate the other prices as a multiple of that one library list price. So hopefully it doesn't make it any more complicated to generate the Onyx feed. It just allows you to put some other options out there that are all derived from that. And so now I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Paula to talk a little bit about the process for opting in on eBOUND.
Thank you, Micah. So for all eBOUND clients, if you are distributing through DeMarc, congrats, your titles are already live on Palace. But if you want to offer the full range of models that Micah was just talking about for your titles, or if you'd like to opt out of distributing to Palace, you must complete an addendum. So this is the addendum that I've been talking about in the last 4 or 5 newsletters that I've sent out about Palace. Again, you can email me anytime and I can send you the addendum. You can opt into which models you'd like to have, or if you'd like to opt out of Palace. Once you complete that, it gets sent to Palace, and Palace will put those new models on your titles right away.
Let's see if folks have other questions. There's been a few in the chat. Yeah, Judy, go ahead.
Um, I'm just unmuting
Yep.
okay, that didn't work. Hi. Okay, so two questions.
Okay.
One, all the images that I saw on here, I work for a children's publisher, so just curious about what the uptake is on kids' books. So that's one question. And then the second one is dumb question because I think I missed something and was distracted. The 30% that you were talking about, if things are being pulled from like Amazon or Overdrive, are we not paying Overdrive for that book and then also paying you? Like that confused me.
Yeah. So let me take that second one first.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
you sell a book on Overdrive. That is a business deal that's entirely between you, eBOUND, and Overdrive. Palace is not a party to that. The library pays a hosting fee to host the middleware and then is able to take that content and merge it with other content in the app. But Palace doesn't have any financial role in the sale of the book. So that's between you all. And obviously, we encourage publishers to make their books available as widely as possible. Does that make sense? So the 30% was when a title is sold on the Palace
The
marketplace.
marketplace. Got it.
That's
Okay.
we take, which I think is less than some
Yeah.
other distributors sometimes
Yeah.
take.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Sure thing. And to your first question, we sell a lot of children's books. Yes, uptake is a little less in children's than is adults for in general, although I'd say audiobooks are growing rapidly for kids. We do have a wide range. Our biggest partner to date has been the California State Library, who has supported libraries all over California. And Cav might remember the details more. She's often close to this, but I want to say 30% of their budget went to kids. So it's substantial. And young adult as well is, very well received in often. So, it depends. I mean, I think if it's really, really little kid books, picture books with a small number of words, they're kind of odd as an ebook sometimes. But as you get into books that are geared a little older, we certainly have a lot of those available. We have a lot of graphic novels that have been very popular. So certainly children's and young adult content, does okay on the marketplace.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate
I
that.
don't know if Zoe or Cav want to speak to that more, but does that answer it? Okay.
Yeah.
Brenda, I see you have a question. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Hi,
Brendan.
everyone. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's been fascinating and particularly love getting your perspective, Zoe. Giving our books a longer life is a kind of moving takeaway for me. I really appreciated you saying that. I think it's kind of early days from my understanding for the rollout of Palace in Canada. And I would love to hear your take on how building patron usage is going. And if I can ask the same question of Micah and Cav, I'd love to hear maybe another case study from the US about how the people who have long established Palace are doing it. Yeah, thanks.
I'm happy to start with that and say at Vancouver Public Library, and I don't want to speak for Edmonton Public Library, but we've been doing a lot of coordinating, so I will say that they're following a very similar strategy. We've been positioning the Palace project as a sneak peek or a glimpse of what we see as the future. We didn't want to put it out there and cause confusion where people would be concerned that they were going to be forced to migrate from one app to another app, because that always causes a certain amount of consternation for patrons. But we wanted to put out there as another option, and we've positioned it as we think this is the future and we want to give you like early access to it. So we're not trying, at this moment, we're not trying to drive a ton of usage. We're putting it out there and trying to build it up into a resource that people will start to adopt because of its benefits. So some of the benefits from the patron side of things is there's content that is in the Palace app that you can't get from any of our other apps, including Libby, because Micah and the team at Lyrasis have managed to negotiate some contracts that have never been available in Canada before, like Audible. Like Canadian libraries have never had the ability to buy Audible titles, but now we do. And so that might drive some patrons to adopt. We also know that patrons are extremely app fatigued. They are tired of being told to download an app. So as we start to buy ebooks from more and more vendors, being able to say there's this one app where you can access all of them in one place is going to be a selling point for patrons. But part of like we're holding back on pushing too hard because we want to see more development and more readiness for the app. Like we need a web version of the app, which doesn't exist right now. We're still trying to figure out how to solve the Kobo problem because about 25% of our ebook loans are read on e-readers. And that isn't possible with Palace right now the way it is with Overdrive. So we're proceeding with caution, but we have seen uptake using that strategy.
And let me just echo all that Zoe said. Speaking about libraries here in the US, for example, California State Library has hundreds of libraries in the state of California that are using Palace, and they're doing really interesting things with Palace. How they adopted was do a grant that was all pretty much lent itself to be all things Palace, Palace content specifically. And so they've invested, over $1 million every year with Palace just on e-content alone. And as Micah mentioned, children's content was a big draw for them. And a lot of those libraries are taking those swim lanes, which Micah describes as far as the collection manager, where folks are taking different titles from different vendors, be it from Overdrive or Baker and Taylor or Amazon titles, and really showing their patrons that everything can be found here in that one siloed app. To speak to Zoe's point, that patrons are getting a lot of app fatigue. So when folks are realizing that they have a choice, meaning patrons have an opportunity to realize that they have a choice, they don't necessarily have to abandon the Overdrive app. But if they're looking for content to be readily available and have a diversification of content and content that is unique to Palace, then they seem to lean into that. A true case study can come from some libraries here in Georgia. The state of Georgia went live in Palace last time this year. And within a month's time of them doing some well thought out marketing pushes just across the various library systems, there are upwards of, I believe, actually 60 library systems in the state of Georgia. And they've done various contests and promotions independently for each system. And so right now, I know there are 2 libraries specifically that are trying to vie to be the queen of Palace. So they're doing really kitschy things on social media. And that has in turn taken their circulation statistics up by 30%. And that was from December of 2024 to January of 2025, just with the initial launch. And those numbers continue to grow. So, as Zoe mentioned, the web browser is not available just at the moment, but that is exactly what our team is working on. We do have a public roadmap so that we remain transparent as to what we're doing. So that's going to be the next big celebratory hurrah of deployment for all our libraries as well as our engineers. But I will say it hasn't stopped Canadian libraries from seeking out Palace. I can confidently say that the BC Libraries Cooperative, they're coming on board with Palace, and we're in the stages right now finalizing the agreement. And this is something that they were very vocal about and made known at OLA. So libraries are coming on, Saskatchewan, I'm in conversations with them. Folks are, regardless of some of the nuances, are definitely seeing the future and are supporting us. And we're very thankful for libraries such as Edmonton and Vancouver who took the first leap of faith and are continuing to see that we are trying to become the future of for libraries and for their patrons for accessibility of e-content.
Thanks. And same here, to looking forward to seeing next steps with VPL and EPL in the lead. That's it's great stuff.
All right, thank you.
All right, we've got a couple questions in the chat pretty much asking, how can Canadian publishers help support Palace with their public libraries? How can we help spread the word about Palace as an option for library patrons?
Cav, do you want to speak to that?
Paula, what was the first part of your question?
Lindsay says, I work for a publisher, but how can we encourage our local libraries to pick Palace up? And also, is there a way to know if our libraries are in the process?
As far as in the process, libraries really wouldn't know, or patrons wouldn't know if a library is in the process of adopting until they go live in the Palace app. And we really try to work with our libraries to help them promote Palace directly. We have a team of folks internally here that send out all sorts of communications and marketing swag, as well as badges that can be put on your website. So really, once your library goes live, then libraries tend to put our logo and direct their patrons to Palace. And if they have Aspen Discovery, that's been a really great way for patrons to serendipitously discover Palace in that fashion as well.
Can I add to that, Kev?
Sure.
I mean, I obviously can't speak for all libraries in Canada, but at my library, if we got an email from a publisher or a patron saying, "I've heard about the Palace project. Are you aware of this? Are you thinking about bringing this on board?" We would be delighted to receive that email, and we'd be very delighted to reply. We always love hearing from patrons and what they're interested in. So Kev is right. A patron wouldn't necessarily know if a library is in the process of onboarding Palace, but I feel pretty confident saying you could reach out to your library and they would be very happy to answer that question.
And then Cav, Emily is asking if you can say what system it is in Saskatchewan. She's a patron there and based there, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'm actually speaking to sales at the moment. So we're at the beginning stages.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, well, this has been a great discussion. We are all available to chat more if other questions come up as you're thinking about this. I know Paula is, and certainly the Palace team is, and I'm sure Zoe would be happy to tell you more about the VPL experience if you have further questions about that.
Anytime.
Yes. Thank you all for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to email them to me directly and I can pass them on to the Palace team. It's a pleasure getting to talk to the Palace team today, and Zoe as well. Thank you for sharing the library perspective. I know we've all been dying to know what librarians really want, so thank you so much. Again, thank you all for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.